Hello again, and welcome to yesterday's Universe Sleep, where questions stretch their arms slowly, like waking giants, and the night gives us room to wonder. Tonight, I'd like to invite you into a thought that feels both ancient and unsettlingly fresh. What if history is not a straight line? What if the story of humanity is a cycle, repeating itself again and again, with each version rising, thriving, and eventually disappearing, leaving only faint, almost invisible traces for the next version to stumble upon? When we think about history, we usually imagine it as a ladder. Primitive humans at the bottom, climbing up step by step to reach space travel, digital life, and whatever comes next. But ladders are only one shape. Some stories are circles. And Earth, with its endless patterns of seasons, tides, extinctions, and renewals, has never really liked straight lines. The planet moves in rhythms. Ice ages come and go. Forests rise, burn, and grow again. Even continents themselves break apart and reunite, as if the ground is breathing in geologic time. So why not civilizations too? Consider this. If another intelligent species, human-like or not, had built its own world here millions of years ago, how would we know? Rocks do not keep secrets for long. Wood decays. Metal corrodes. Even our tallest skyscrapers, left alone, would be rubble within a few thousand years. Dust swallowed by forests, deserts, or seas. On the scale of deep time, 1,000,000 years is enough to erase almost everything. And yet, the idea lingers. Some scientists have asked it formally, giving it the name the Silurian hypothesis. They wondered, if there had once been an industrial civilization long before ours, what traces could survive? Not stone statues or crumbling cities, but chemical fingerprints, odd spikes of carbon in ancient rocks, unusual isotopes, patterns in the climate record. In other words, clues written not in monuments but in the earth itself. But here's where things grow stranger. Mythologies across cultures, from the Hindu yugas to the Mayan ages of the world to the Greek stories of golden and bronze generations, all whisper the same pattern. Humanity rises, falls, and rises again. Sometimes it is a flood that resets the story. Sometimes fire. Sometimes the slow unraveling of time itself. To our modern ears, these sound like symbolic tales. But what if they were distant echoes of something real? What if memory itself carries fragments across cycles, turning into myth when details dissolve? Look around at our world now. We treat ourselves as the first and only. But imagine a different perspective, that we are simply this round of the wheel, the latest draft in Earth's long experiment with intelligence. Perhaps before us there were others, different in form, maybe reptilian, maybe something we wouldn't even recognize as human at all. Perhaps their tools were not silicon and steel, but something that left no easy trace. Perhaps their time came and went, and now it is ours. This thought is not meant to frighten you. Instead, it's meant to loosen the grip of certainty, to let your mind drift into the quiet possibility that history has deeper layers than we usually dare to imagine. The Earth has turned for 4.5 billion years. We have been here for the briefest moment. If civilizations are waves, we may be only one among many, cresting, shining, and someday dissolving back into the sea. So as you settle tonight, I invite you to hold this question gently. What if we are not the first? And what if we will not be the last? Settle in. Let's lean a little closer to the scientific side of this question. Because if we want to ask whether humanity is just one version in a repeating cycle, we need to know what the Earth actually remembers and what it forgets. The first thing to understand is that the planet is a ruthless eraser. Think of it this way. If you left a modern city abandoned today, In just a few hundred years, nature would creak back. Roads would crack. Glass would shatter. Forests would weave through the skeletons of buildings. In 1,000 years, most of it would be rubble. In 10,000, almost nothing recognizable would remain. Archaeologists today struggle to piece together human lives from mere fragments of pottery or carved stones only a few tens of thousands of years old. That's a blink compared to the millions, or hundreds of millions, of years we're talking about. So what survives? Geology is picky. For a fossil to form, an organism must be buried quickly, shielded from decay, and replaced by minerals over vast stretches of time. Most creatures, plants, even entire forests never make it into that record. And cities, tools, technologies, they vanish even faster. Concrete crumbles. Metal oxidizes. Plastics may last longer, but even they break down under sun, heat, and microbial life. What's left after millions of years isn't skyscrapers, it's chemical signatures. That's where the Silurian hypothesis comes in. In 2018, two researchers, Gavin Schmidt, a climate scientist, and Adam Frank, an astrophysicist, asked the bold question: if an industrial civilization existed long before us, how would we detect it? They weren't proposing that it definitely happened. They were asking whether Earth's rocks and sediments could keep the memory. Their answer was humbling. They suggested we look not for artifacts but for anomalies. Layers in the geologic record where carbon isotopes shift suddenly, suggesting massive burning of carbon-based fuels. Unusual concentrations of heavy metals. Synthetic molecules that don't occur naturally, things like plastics or industrial chemicals, if they could somehow survive. Climate patterns that look abrupt and unnatural, warming or cooling far faster than geology usually allows. And here's the unsettling part. Some of these strange layers already exist. There are spikes of carbon, mysterious extinctions, sudden climate shifts buried deep in Earth's history. Were they caused by natural events? Almost certainly, in most cases. But could one or two have been caused by something else, something intelligent that lived here before us? That possibility is harder to dismiss than we might like. The Earth has endured multiple mass extinctions. The end Permian event about 250 million years ago nearly wiped life out completely. Scientists call it the Great Dying. The asteroid strike that ended the age of the dinosaurs is another famous one. But between and around these cataclysms are quieter mysteries. Sudden bursts of warming, unexplained chemical traces, ecosystems collapsing in ways that don't always have a clear cause. What if one of those layers hides not just the memory of volcanoes or asteroids, but of industry? A civilization that burned its fuels, changed its climate, and vanished, leaving only a geological scar as evidence? It's not proof. But the fact that such a scenario is even possible means we can't ignore it. Earth's memory is long, but not perfect. And sometimes, what it chooses to keep is not bones or cities, but whispers in stone and carbon. So here's the next question to carry with you. If another version of civilization once lived here, are we standing on top of its ashes without even knowing it? Let's turn now from science to story, because sometimes the oldest myths carry echoes of things our instruments can't measure. Across cultures and continents, separated by oceans and centuries, human traditions whisper the same strange idea. We are not the first. Take the Hindu concept of the yugas. In this vision, human history unfolds in vast cycles, ages of truth and harmony giving way to darker times of decay and chaos, before the wheel turns again. According to this system, civilizations rise and fall not once, but endlessly, like breaths of the universe. It is not a ladder but a spiral, repeating but never quite the same. Or look to the Mayan world, where myths speak of earlier creations of humanity. The gods, they said, tried multiple times. First, humans were made of mud, but they dissolved in the rain. Then of wood, but they lacked souls and were destroyed. Only after several attempts did the current version of humankind emerge. To the Mayans, we are at least the third draft of the human story. Even in ancient Greece, the poet Hesiod described the ages of man. The Golden Age, where people lived in peace and abundance. The Silver Age, weaker and more corrupt. The Bronze Age, violent and warlike. Then came the Age of Heroes, and finally the Iron Age, our own era, marked by struggle, toil, and decline. The message was clear. Humanity is not singular. It comes in waves, each ending before the next begins. Travel further and you find similar rhythms in Norse mythology, where the world ends in Ragnarok only to be reborn. In the stories of the Aztecs, where 5 suns, or 5 eras of humanity, rise and fall in succession. In the tales of indigenous peoples across North America, who speak of earlier worlds washed away by flood or fire. Now, of course, myths are not data. They are not geology. But they are records. Records of human imagination, of collective memory, of patterns noticed and preserved through story. And sometimes, those patterns line up eerily with what science later uncovers. Flood myths, for instance, exist almost everywhere. Were they only symbolic, or do they echo the real memory of rising seas after the last ice age, when coastlines shifted and swallowed entire lands? Here's a thought to linger on. What if these myths are not merely metaphor, but distant recollections of cycles so long that they outlived their own storytellers? What if human cultures, thousands of years apart, were trying to tell us the same thing? History is not linear, and we are walking a road already traveled. So tonight, as you listen, imagine this. Perhaps buried in the world's oldest tales are fragments of other humanities, versions that came before us, lived their story, and vanished. Not fantasy, not allegory, but memory bent by time into myth. And if that's true, then our place in the cycle is both humbling and haunting. We are not the pinnacle, not the first, not the only. We are the next turn of a wheel that has been spinning far longer than we've been able to count. Let's weave the threads together now, science in one hand, myth in the other, because sometimes they seem to be telling the same story, just in different dialects of truth. Think of the flood myths. Nearly every culture has one. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written tales on Earth, the gods send a great flood to wipe away humanity, sparing only a single man who builds a boat. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah does the same. In Hindu tradition, Manu is warned by a giant fish and survives a flood that drowns the world. In Central America, the Aztecs tell of suns, or epochs, destroyed, one by jaguars, another by wind, another by fire, another by water. To the scientific eye, these are stories. But geology whispers its own version. At the end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago, glaciers melted. Seas rose hundreds of feet. Entire coastlines vanished, swallowing lands where people surely lived. Archaeologists have found drowned settlements, now resting under the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, the coast of India. Imagine what it must have felt like to watch the ocean climb each season, stealing fields, villages, and memories. For survivors, how could that not become myth? The same pattern appears with fire. Many traditions speak of worlds ended in flames. The Norse foretold Ragnarok, when fire giants would set the sky ablaze. The Hopi people tell of previous worlds destroyed by fire, followed by renewal. Science, too, holds its own fiery record. Massive volcanic eruptions like the one at Toba 74,000 years ago, which may have nearly ended humanity. Or even greater events. Lava flows that covered whole continents, burning forests and choking skies, linked to past mass extinctions. And then there are the cycles of ages, the yugas, Hesiod's ages of man, the Aztec suns. Myth paints them as stories of decline and rebirth. Science, again, offers its own parallel. The fossil record, which shows waves of flourishing life followed by sudden collapse. 5 great extinctions, each one clearing the slate for a new cast of characters. Could it be that human memory, stretched across millennia, caught glimpses of this rhythm and reshaped it into story? Here is a thought worth holding gently. Myth and science may not be opposites at all, but companions. One keeps its record in stone and isotope, the other in song and parable. Both perhaps point to the same truth, that the earth has always moved in cycles, and life, even intelligent life, may be swept into those rhythms. Now imagine this. What if one of those cycles included not just species, but civilizations? What if somewhere in the deep past, long before pyramids or satellites, there was another version of us, a different humanity or something like it, that lived, thrived, and fell? Its ruins are gone, its bones are dust, but maybe its story lingers, scattered in myths of floods, fires, and worlds reborn. And if so, then when we tell these stories today, we may be remembering not only our ancestors' fears, but also another humanity's fate. Let's walk now into the misty ground between archaeology and imagination. Those places where the soil offers us puzzles, where artifacts whisper but do not explain. Because if history is cyclical, if there were other versions of humanity before us, perhaps their faintest traces still lie beneath our feet. Take the site of Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. It was built more than 11,000 years ago, long before Stonehenge, before the pyramids, before humans were even supposed to be building anything on that scale. Vast stone pillars carved with animals, arranged in circles, buried carefully under layers of soil. According to the old ladder of progress view of history, this should not exist. And yet it does. Did some earlier knowledge survive a forgotten catastrophe, resurfacing as if memory itself was trying again? Or consider the pyramids of Egypt and Mesoamerica. Different continents, separated by oceans, yet both cultures raised mountains of stone aligned with the stars. Coincidence, some say, or a natural result of human ingenuity. But what if these echoes of form, these repeated gestures of civilization, hint at something older, a pattern humans have carried across cycles of rise and fall? Then there are the out-of-place artifacts that stir debate. Ancient batteries from Baghdad, gears of the Antikythera mechanism pulled from a Greek shipwreck, maps from the Middle Ages that seem to chart Antarctica long before it was officially discovered. Most can be explained, yes, but not always fully. And even when explained, they leave behind a residue of wonder. How much do we not know about what came before? And always there is the sea. More than 70% of Earth's surface lies hidden beneath waves, and much of it has never been explored. Off the coast of India, divers have found the submerged ruins of what might be ancient cities, their streets and walls now wrapped in coral. Off Japan's Yonaguni coast lies a vast underwater structure. Some call it natural, others swear it was carved. If sea levels rose so drastically after the last ice age, then whole chapters of human, or pre-human, history could be lying drowned just out of reach. Science urges caution here. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. But at the same time, Absence of proof is not proof of absence. The Earth is a skilled recycler. It buries, drowns, erases. If another civilization lived tens of thousands, or even millions of years before us, we may not find their cities. Instead, we may only find what feels like echoes, myths of floods, unexplained alignments, artifacts that don't quite fit. Imagine this possibility. Perhaps what we call mysteries of the ancient world are not anomalies at all, but faint footprints of previous versions of humanity, traces blurred by time, scattered like fragments of a story half remembered in dreams. And so we return to the question, are we truly the first, or only the latest to walk this path? If Earth keeps its history in cycles, then maybe what we think of as the beginning is only the most recent turn of the wheel. Let's dive beneath the waves now, into the drowned landscapes where memory and geology mingle. If history is cyclical, then the oceans may be hiding the pages we've lost, the chapters of civilizations washed away by time and tide. After the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, the world changed dramatically. Glaciers melted, and seas rose by more than 100 meters. Imagine coastlines retreating like vanishing dreams. Entire river valleys, fertile plains, and coastal cities, if they existed, would have been swallowed whole. Today, those places lie hidden, buried beneath layers of silt, coral, and centuries of silence. Take the Gulf of Cambay off the coast of India. In the early 2000s, sonar scans revealed what seemed like vast geometric structures on the seafloor, grids that looked like streets, outlines like walls. Divers recovered artifacts, including stone tools and carvings. Some claim to be nearly 9,000 years old. Skeptics argue the formations are natural, or that the artifacts drifted there. But the thought lingers, what if this was a city, drowned by the rising seas after the Ice Age? Far to the east, near Yonaguni, Japan, lies another enigma. Massive underwater terraces and steps, carved with sharp angles and flat plains. To some, it is an ancient city, perhaps 10,000 years old, its monuments toppled into the sea. To others, it is nothing more than eroded sandstone, shaped by natural forces that just happen to resemble architecture. Yet when you see the photographs, the pyramidal forms, the long corridors, you can't help but feel the whisper of something human, or at least intentional. And then there are the Doggerland Plains, once connecting Britain to mainland Europe. For thousands of years, it was a fertile land of rivers, forests, and human settlements. Now it sleeps beneath the North Sea, its people forgotten except for a few tools and bones dredged up by fishing nets. Doggerland reminds us that entire worlds can vanish quietly, leaving little more than rumor in the sediments. If the cycle of civilizations is real, the ocean would be the greatest of vaults, hiding entire versions of humanity beneath its weight. Not in the way of Atlantis, a perfect city lost in a single night, but more slowly, more ruthlessly. 1,000 years of rising tides, a coastline shrinking one season at a time, until farms, temples, villages are gone, swallowed without drama into the silence of the sea. What would remain after 10,000 years underwater? Stone, perhaps, but even that would erode. Carvings blurred by coral, monuments reshaped into reefs. Organic matter would vanish. Metals would corrode. The ocean is both preserver and destroyer, concealing secrets behind veils of sand. And so we face a humbling thought. If there were civilizations before us, their ruins may lie beneath the waves, too deep, too hidden, too eroded for us ever to find. Which means our question may not be answered by discovery, but by silence. Still, silence can be its own kind of evidence. When myths from every corner of the earth speak of floods, When sonar reveals impossible shapes beneath the sea, when memory itself seems to cling to water, it's hard not to wonder whether we are walking paths that others once walked, now buried under oceans that used to be fields. As you let this thought drift through you tonight, imagine the sea not just as a border but as a library. Its shelves are dark, its books unreadable, but within them may lie the forgotten chapters of worlds before ours. Let's linger beneath the sea a little longer, because the ocean has always been more than water. It is memory itself, vast and difficult to read. If Earth's history is cyclical, if civilizations rise and fall like tides, then the ocean is where many of those stories end up, preserved only in fragments. Imagine standing on a high cliff 10,000 years ago, watching the shoreline inch inward year after year. At first it might seem harmless, a little flooding in spring, a few farms lost near the coast. But centuries pass, and entire valleys vanish. Rivers no longer find their old beds. They are swallowed into widening bays. Villages retreat, then cities. Temples crumble into waves. The sea is patient. It doesn't conquer in a single battle. It waits, inching forward until whole worlds disappear. We know this happened, not just in myth but in fact. Doggerland, now sleeping beneath the North Sea, once held forests, game, and human life. The Black Sea, before it filled, was thought to be a fertile plain, a place where farming peoples thrived. When the Mediterranean surged in, the flood may have been so sudden that memory of it burned itself into stories that still echo today as flood myths. Now imagine civilizations older still, not 10,000 years, but 50,000 or 500,000. Entire coastlines, perhaps even continents, could have held their cities, their fields, their monuments. Today, they would rest under layers of sediment, tectonic scars, or ocean trenches miles deep. We think of the ocean floor as eternal, but it too is recycled. The process of subduction swallows seafloor back into the Earth's mantle over tens of millions of years. If an ancient civilization built by the coast, as ours does, then much of it could already be gone, not buried but melted, erased. Yet fragments sometimes whisper back. Fishermen pull up tools from the seabed, bones of animals that once roamed on dry land, pieces of ancient forests still preserved beneath silt. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar scans revealed shapes some interpreted as city-like structures, pyramids, roads, plazas. Off India, as we mentioned, the Gulf of Cambay suggests vast constructions far older than expected. Are these illusions of geology, or is the ocean showing us shadows of lives once lived? It is tempting to leap to Atlantis, that shining city Plato spoke of, destroyed in a single night. But perhaps the truth, if it exists, is subtler. Not one city, but many. Not one catastrophe, but countless small ones. Rising seas, shifting rivers, storms, earthquakes. Civilizations quietly erased, their memory dissolved into salt water. The ocean does not give up its secrets easily. Divers risk their lives in the dark. Sonar paints blurry pictures. Sediment hides more than it reveals. And yet, even in its silence, the sea compels us to wonder. If another humanity walked the earth before us, if another version of our story once rose and fell, then the ocean may be holding their bones, their tools, their songs, locked in a vault we cannot open. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine walking along one of those drowned coastlines. The sand beneath your feet is not sand at all, but the dust of a city long forgotten. The waves whisper against ruins no one remembers. You bend down and lift a stone, shaped strangely, worn smooth by time. Was it once part of a wall? A tool? or simply a trick of the sea? The ocean does not answer. It never does. Let's step back onto land now, carrying with us the salt and silence of the sea. Because while the oceans may guard their secrets too closely, the land still bears scars, enigmas carved into stone and earth, puzzles that whisper of civilizations older or stranger than our textbooks allow. Consider the Nazca lines of Peru, vast geoglyphs stretching across the desert, visible only from high above. Animals, spirals, straight lines running for miles. Officially, they are about 2,000 years old, made by the Nazca culture. But even if that's true, they raise deeper questions. Why build shapes so massive they cannot be seen from the ground? Why spend generations etching the desert itself into a message only the sky could read? Was this knowledge passed down from something earlier? A memory kept alive through ritual until it resurfaced in stone? Or take Göbekli Tepe, that haunting site we touched on before. Stone circles 12,000 years old, built with skill and intention long before humans were supposed to know how. The carvings are intricate. Foxes, vultures, snakes, beings half human, half animal. What's most curious is that the site was deliberately buried, as if hidden for someone, or something, to find later. It feels less like the beginning of civilization and more like a remnant, a reawakening, or even a farewell. Further east, in Baalbek, Lebanon, lie stone blocks so massive that modern cranes would struggle to move them. Some weigh more than 1,000 tons. Why quarry stones so enormous, when smaller blocks would have sufficed? Official history says they were left unused, abandoned mid-project. But one wonders, did the builders inherit techniques or traditions from an earlier time, now lost to us? And then there are the megaliths of Malta, the stone spheres of Costa Rica, the step pyramids scattered from Egypt to Indonesia to the Americas. Each culture explains them in its own way, but the patterns keep repeating. Stone shaped and lifted beyond easy explanation, alignments with stars and solstices, monuments that seem to outlast even the cultures that made them. Are these just convergent ideas, or echoes of something older, carried across cycles of humanity? The desert, unlike the ocean, preserves. Sand buries but does not always erase. Mountains endure. Ruins can linger for thousands of years. But stretch the timeline further. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even stone wears away. What we see today may not be the first version of these monuments, but the latest. A pyramid rebuilt on top of an older pyramid. A temple raised where one stood before. Layers of history stacked like palimpsests, each generation building upon memories it does not fully understand. Here is a thought to hold. What if some of the world's great ruins are not the origins of civilization, but its survivors? Not beginnings, but continuations. Not inventions, but inheritances. As you let that idea settle, picture this. You stand in front of an ancient wall. The stones are weathered, their edges blurred by centuries. But as you run your hand across them, you feel something deeper, like touching not just rock, but memory itself. You realize the wall is not just old. It is a survivor of another time, another cycle when humanity, or something like it, walked this earth before us. Let's widen the view now, pulling back from single ruins and monuments to the vast canvas of deep time. Because if the earth itself moves in cycles, if continents and climates rise and fall like tides, then perhaps civilizations, whether ours or others before us, are not exceptions, but part of that same rhythm. The Earth has known 5 great mass extinctions. The Ordovician, when oceans themselves collapsed. The Devonian, when plants transformed the atmosphere and life struggled to adapt. The Permian, the Great Dying, when more than 90% of species vanished. The Triassic, which cleared the stage for dinosaurs. The Cretaceous, when an asteroid ended the reign of those giants. Each time, life nearly ended. Each time, it returned, different, reshaped, renewed. Now imagine if civilizations follow the same pattern. What if intelligence itself is part of the Earth's rhythm, rising in one form, fading, then reappearing later in another, just as forests regrow after fire? If so, then our version of humanity is only one chapter in a book that has been written and erased many times. Geology gives us glimpses of this vast cycle. Entire mountain ranges rise and fall in the span of 200 million years. Oceans open, close, and vanish, leaving only fossils of coral in the desert. Continents drift together, forming supercontinents like Pangaea, then drift apart again. Even the air we breathe is part of this long cycle. Oxygen levels have swung wildly through history, from suffocating lows to times when insects grew larger than birds. Civilizations, like species, depend on stability. Too much heat, too little oxygen, too many volcanoes, and the balance collapses. If another intelligence once rose before us, it might have thrived for tens of thousands of years, or only a few hundred, before the earth shifted beneath it. Perhaps its world ended not in fire or war, but in silence. Seas rising, storms growing, soil turning to dust. And here's the humbling truth. The earth is not a static stage on which history plays. It is an actor, a force, a rhythm maker. When James Lovelock proposed the Gaia hypothesis, that Earth behaves like a living organism, self-regulating through feedback loops, he raised a question few wanted to face. If Earth is alive, then civilizations are not its masters but its passengers. And passengers do not always survive the turns of the wheel. Think of it this way. If you found a fossil reef in the desert, you would know the land had once been ocean. If you found black layers of coal, you would know a forest once stood there. So what would be the fossil of a civilization? Layers of carbon ash? Shards of synthetic molecules? A spike of rare isotopes left by technology? Those might be all that remains when a cycle ends, buried deep, waiting for another age to wonder at them. So perhaps the real question is not whether we are the first, but whether we are part of a larger rhythm, one in which civilizations bloom and fade like the forests and seas, forgotten until the earth is ready to write again. As you let this thought drift, imagine time not as a line but as a spiral. Each turn brings back familiar patterns, but never exactly the same. Maybe other minds once walked here, looked at the stars, asked the same questions. Maybe we are their echo, or maybe we are their continuation. Let's look more closely at the fingerprints, the subtle, almost invisible traces that any civilization, no matter how ancient, might leave behind. Because while ruins crumble and bones dissolve, the earth has a way of recording certain things it cannot easily erase. Think about our own age. If humans vanished tomorrow, cities would fade quickly. But in the rocks, in the ice, and in the atmosphere, our mark would endure. Geologists call this the Anthropocene, a proposed new epoch defined by us. What are its markers? Plastics buried in soil and sea, concrete woven into the crust, carbon dioxide spikes in the atmosphere, nitrogen from fertilizers in sediments, radioactive isotopes from nuclear tests lodged deep in rock. Now, imagine another civilization, millions of years before ours. Their cities may be gone, their language lost, their monuments turned to dust. But if they burned fuels, mined metals, altered their climate, or created synthetic substances, those effects might still echo in the record. This is what the Silurian hypothesis, yes, named half-jokingly after a race of ancient reptiles from science fiction, tries to answer. How could we detect a civilization so old that not a single artifact remains? The answer lies in chemistry. Scientists point to carbon isotope ratios. When vast amounts of fossil fuels are burned, the balance of carbon-12 and carbon-13 shifts unnaturally. Today, we see that shift clearly in ice cores and sediments. But similar anomalies exist in deeper time too. For example, during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, about 56 million years ago, global temperatures spiked, oceans acidified, and carbon isotopes shifted abruptly. Officially, this was likely caused by volcanic activity or methane release. But could it also be a whisper of something else? A cycle like ours, long forgotten? Then there are mystery layers in geology. Thin stripes of unusual metals, odd concentrations of rare earth elements, sudden climate changes that don't fit known patterns. To us, they are curiosities, often explained by natural forces. But what if one of them is not natural at all? What if it is the fossil of a civilization, its industry written in chemistry instead of stone? Here's the unsettling part. Even if we found such a layer, proving it came from intelligence would be nearly impossible. A spike of carbon might mean machines, or just volcanoes. An unusual isotope might signal technology, or a comet strike. Nature is complex, and it often mimics what humans, or any intelligent species, might do. Which means this: the traces of earlier civilizations may already be cataloged in geology textbooks, filed under unexplained anomaly or natural variation. We may be walking past their fossils every day without recognizing them. So the next time you hear about a sudden warming in the distant past, or a strange chemical deposit in ancient rock, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this just geology, or is it memory? A memory not of forests or seas, but of minds, lives, and civilizations that came before us? And here lies the quiet irony. One day, millions of years from now, if another cycle begins, if another species rises, they may look at our Anthropocene and ask the very same question. Was this nature, or was it someone like us? Let's drift back now into the world of myth and philosophy, because long before science gave us isotope ratios and climate graphs, human beings already sensed that history was not a straight road but a turning wheel. Across cultures, the same story repeats. Ages rise, ages fall, and we are living only one turn of that cycle. In ancient India, the yugas describe a cosmic cycle of 4 ages. The Satya Yuga, an age of truth and harmony, gives way to the Treta, then the Dvapara, and finally the Kali Yuga, the age of decline, in which we are said to live now. After this dark age ends, the cycle begins again, renewed. Not a single path, but an eternal spiral. The Greeks spoke of the ages of man: the Golden Age, a time of abundance and peace; the Silver Age, weaker, more corrupt; the Bronze Age, violent and doomed; and the Iron Age, harsh and full of toil. In some versions, the cycle does not end but repeats, a cosmic rhythm echoing the rise and fall of human striving. Among the Maya, there were multiple creations of humankind. The first people, made of mud, dissolved. The second, made of wood, lacked spirit and were destroyed. Only the third version, flesh and blood, corn and breath, endured. Even here, the story is not of a single beginning, but of repeated attempts, each one erased before the next began. The Norse envisioned Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, where fire and ice consume the world. Yet after the destruction, A new Earth emerges from the sea, green and renewed, with survivors to begin again. Even in finality, the Norse saw continuation, a cycle hidden in the ashes of the end. And then there are the flood stories. So many flood stories. From the Hopi to the Sumerians, from Polynesia to Mesopotamia, waters rise, humanity falls, and a remnant survives to begin anew. Science tells us sea levels did surge after the Ice Age, swallowing lands and drowning memory. Myth tells us those floods were not accidents but endings, cleansing the world so a new humanity could emerge. Philosophers, too, have felt this rhythm. The Greek thinker Heraclitus wrote of the eternal return, fire consuming and renewing all things. Later, Nietzsche asked whether existence itself was cyclical, that we live our lives again and again, endlessly repeating. The shape of time, they said, is not a line but a circle. What unites these myths and philosophies is not their details but their pattern. They all insist that what we see as singular is only temporary, that destruction is never final, that life, humanity, even civilization itself is something the universe tries over and over, like waves breaking on the same shore. Now imagine this. What if these stories are not only metaphors? What if they are fragments of memory passed across cycles, echoes of earlier humanities, dimly remembered, reshaped into story, preserved in ritual and myth? Perhaps myth is the language of cycles, just as science is the language of data. One speaks in symbols, the other in numbers, but both hint at the same truth. History turns, and we are not the first to walk this path. So as you settle tonight, let this question rest with you. Are we living in the first age of humankind, or only in the latest draft, the newest verse of a song Earth has been singing for longer than we can imagine? Let's circle back to the science, because the Earth itself has always been the great reset button. If myths speak of floods and fires, of endings and rebirths, geology shows us the mechanics behind them. The catastrophes that sweep the planet clean and force life to start again. The most famous are the mass extinctions. 5 times in Earth's past, the biosphere collapsed so profoundly that most species vanished. Each extinction was both an ending and a beginning. The Ordovician extinction, 444 million years ago, triggered by rapid climate swings as ice sheets grew and shrank, wiping out nearly 85% of marine species. The Devonian extinction, 375 million years ago, oceans stagnated, oxygen levels dropped, and countless fish and coral disappeared. Some scientists suspect that land plants, spreading across continents, altered the climate so dramatically that it suffocated the seas. The Permian extinction, 252 million years ago, the Great Dying. Volcanoes erupted for centuries in Siberia, releasing carbon and methane, raising global temperatures, and killing off more than 90% of all species. The world itself nearly ended. The Triassic extinction, 201 million years ago, massive volcanic activity again, paving the way for dinosaurs to rise. The Cretaceous extinction, 66 million years ago, the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs' reign, plunging the Earth into fire and darkness, but giving mammals a chance to thrive. Each time the Earth was remade, entire lineages of life disappeared. Others took their place. And each time, complexity eventually returned, as if life itself insists on climbing back toward intelligence. Now imagine civilizations woven into this pattern. If intelligence is a natural outcome of complexity, then perhaps it has risen more than once. Maybe long before us, there was another branch of life, different from humans, perhaps reptilian or avian, that reached its own version of culture, of cities, of knowledge. Perhaps it too was swept away in one of these resets, erased like forests and seas. Even in more recent times, Earth has tested humanity with smaller resets. Around 74,000 years ago, the eruption of Mount Toba in Indonesia may have plunged the planet into a volcanic winter. Some scientists believe it reduced the global human population to just a few thousand survivors. If true, then we have already come dangerously close to vanishing. And then there are the Younger Dryas events about 12,000 years ago, when the world suddenly plunged back into near Ice Age conditions just as humans were beginning to farm. Some researchers speculate that an impact from fragments of a comet might have triggered fires, floods, and chaos across continents. Whether or not that theory holds, the fact remains: Earth can change its balance quickly, and when it does, civilizations, if they exist, are fragile. So when myths tell us of floods, of fire, of worlds destroyed and remade, perhaps they are not only poetry. Perhaps they are memory, ancestral witnesses to the resets Earth has already imposed. Here's the haunting thought: if intelligence rises naturally, then perhaps every few tens of millions of years, the Earth gives it a chance. And just as naturally, it takes it away, sweeping the stage clean with ice, with fire, with rising seas. Not out of cruelty, but as part of its rhythm. So maybe we are not the first. Maybe we are simply the latest to stand on this thin edge of stability. One more attempt in a cycle that has been repeating since life began. Let's step back onto the trail of archaeological mysteries. Those places where the past doesn't fit neatly into our timelines, where human hands seem to have left traces far older, or far stranger, than we expect. If Earth's history is cyclical, these could be the faint fingerprints of earlier chapters in humanity's story. Take Tiwanaku near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Its ruins, massive stone blocks fitted with precision, some weighing more than 100 tons, sit 12,000 feet above sea level. Officially, the city flourished about 1,500 years ago. But some researchers argue the stonework looks older, almost as if it belonged to an earlier civilization that predated the rise of the Andes cultures. The blocks bear cuts so sharp and clean that even modern tools would struggle to replicate them. Are we looking at the work of Tiwanaku's people, or the inheritance of something older? Or consider Sacsayhuaman above Cuzco, Peru. Enormous zigzagging walls, each stone carved and fitted so tightly you can't slip a blade of grass between them. The Inca are credited with building it, but they themselves said the walls were already there, the work of the first people. The Inca repaired, reused, and built upon them, but the origins may stretch further back than our records allow. In Egypt, too, the timeline phrase, the Sphinx, officially dated to about 4,500 years ago, shows erosion patterns some geologists argue could only come from thousands of years of heavy rainfall. If true, that would place its origin closer to 10,000 years ago, long before Egyptian civilization was supposed to exist. Was it carved by an earlier people, and only later adopted by the pharaohs? Travel to Malta, and you find megalithic temples older than Stonehenge, aligned to the solstices. In Turkey, at Göbekli Tepe, 12,000-year-old stone circles suggest that complex architecture appeared right after the Ice Age, almost as if it was rediscovered rather than invented. In Japan, underwater near Yonaguni, lie step platforms that look eerily like a sunken city, though science debates whether they are human-made or natural formations. Each of these sites has explanations, of course. Conventional archaeology insists they are the work of the cultures we already know, ingenious, resourceful, perfectly capable of such feats. And perhaps that is true. But the questions linger. Why do so many of the oldest monuments seem deliberately aligned with stars, solstices, and equinoxes? Why do so many cultures say they inherited their knowledge from earlier first peoples, culture bringers who came before recorded time? If Earth's history is cyclical, these ruins may be survivors, the scattered bones of older civilizations, carried through catastrophe into the present. Not all of them, not complete, just fragments, enough to spark myths, enough to puzzle archaeologists, enough to make us wonder whether history is much older and much less linear than we think. So here's the thought to drift on. What if humanity did not invent civilization once, but many times? What if the ruins we see today are not the dawn of culture, but the last shadows of something far older, the faint remnants of lives erased by cycles of flood, fire, and forgetting? Let's stay with the enigmatic monuments and lost technologies, because they are like riddles carved into the bones of the earth. Each one feels like a doorway, half open, hinting that we are not the first to walk this path. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Greek shipwreck over a century ago. It looks like a lump of corroded bronze, but inside it is a clockwork machine of astonishing complexity. Gears within gears, designed to track the movements of the heavens. Scholars date it to around 2,000 years ago, but no other known device of its kind appears for more than 1,000 years after. Was it a lone genius's invention, or the echo of a deeper technological lineage that reached back further than we realize? Or the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, which seems to show the coastlines of South America, and possibly Antarctica, long before they were officially discovered, and with uncanny accuracy. Skeptics argue the details are coincidence, but the mapmaker himself claimed he compiled it from far older sources. If so, whose knowledge was he inheriting? In South America, we find the Colcas of Ollantaytambo, stone storehouses aligned with the stars. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid aligns with the cardinal directions more precisely than most modern buildings, its base almost perfectly level despite being built on uneven bedrock. Across the world, megaliths, temples, and standing stones point not randomly, but toward solstices, equinoxes, and constellations. Why were so many early cultures obsessed with the sky? Was it simply curiosity, or the survival of an older knowledge, carried through cycles like a torch in the dark? And then there is the question of stone itself. Many of the world's oldest monuments are made of stone so massive, so perfectly cut, that even with modern machinery the task would be daunting. At Baalbek, Lebanon, blocks weigh more than 1,000 tons. At Puma Punku in Bolivia, stones are carved with interlocking precision, as though they were machine-milled. Archaeologists propose ingenious methods of levers, ramps, and manpower. But one can't help but wonder, why choose techniques so excessive, so difficult, unless they were inherited traditions from an earlier time when the knowledge, or the tools, were different? Of course, mainstream explanations exist for each of these puzzles. No single artifact proves that there was a forgotten civilization before ours. And yet, taken together, they form a pattern. A pattern of knowledge that appears too suddenly, of monuments built too precisely, of myths too consistent across the world. A pattern that suggests perhaps we are seeing not beginnings, but survivals, echoes of a deeper story half erased. Imagine, then, that we are only the latest inheritors. That across cycles, fragments of knowledge endure like seeds in the soil, waiting to sprout again. The stars, the stones, the myths, they are not random. They are memory itself, scattered across time, whispering, "You are not the first. You will not be the last." And here's the haunting thought. Maybe every civilization believes it is unique, until one day it becomes the ruins another will puzzle over. Let's turn the lens inward now, to our own civilization, because if Earth's history is cyclical, we must ask, how much of us would survive if the wheel turned again? We imagine ourselves permanent, but permanence is an illusion. Look around at our cities. Glass towers, steel bridges, endless highways. They feel solid, immovable, and yet, leave them untended for a century and nature begins to reclaim them. Roots split concrete. Water rusts steel. Glass shatters. In 500 years, many cities would be indistinguishable from hills of rubble. In 5,000, the forests would have swallowed them whole. Archaeologists today struggle to reconstruct human history from a few scattered bones, potsherds, and stone tools only tens of thousands of years old. What, then, would be left of us in 10 million years? Plastics, perhaps tiny microfragments buried in sediments, mistaken for strange fossils. Concrete, crumbling into dust, but maybe preserved in isolated layers of rock. Radiation isotopes, faint traces of our nuclear age, lodged deep in strata. Carbon spikes, a clear signal that something burned immense amounts of fuel, altering the atmosphere. But our art, our books, our languages? Gone. Even our machines would corrode. Satellites might orbit a while, then fall, burning up in the sky. Our great monuments, the Eiffel Tower, the Golden Gate, even Mount Rushmore, would erode to nothing. The earth does not keep memory kindly. And so here lies the unsettling symmetry. If another civilization rose millions of years before ours, we might never know. Their skyscrapers would be gone, their tools erased, their stories dissolved into dust, just as ours will be when the cycle turns again. We like to think of ourselves as exceptional, but maybe we are only temporary. A layer in the rock, a spike in the carbon record, a few chemical anomalies that some future intelligence may puzzle over. Perhaps they will hold up a fragment of plastic, just as we hold up a shard of pottery, and wonder, who were these people? How did they live? Why did they vanish? And here's the deeper question. Are we preparing ourselves to be just another forgotten cycle? Our climate is shifting. Our seas are rising. Our soils are thinning. Just as Earth has reset before, perhaps it is preparing to reset again. If so, we are not immune. We are only the next in a long line of civilizations to crest, break, and fall. So as you listen tonight, imagine this future. Our ruins invisible in the deep time of geology, but our fingerprints still faintly there. In carbon, in isotopes, in a few stubborn plastics drifting in the fossil record. A future civilization might stumble upon those traces and wonder, just as we do now. Were we the first, or only one more version of humanity in Earth's endless cycle? Let's step back into the myths and philosophies, because maybe they are more than stories. Maybe they are warnings, messages carried across time, left by earlier cycles of humanity, disguised as legends so they could survive when monuments could not. Take the Hindu yugas. They don't just describe ages of harmony and decline. They describe repetition. Humanity rises, reaches greatness, collapses, and begins again. It's not linear. It's a wheel. Could this be memory, not metaphor? Could ancient thinkers have been encoding the knowledge that civilizations before them had already risen and fallen? Or the Mayan Popol Vuh, which speaks of failed creations, humans of mud, humans of wood, destroyed by flood, fire, or their own weakness. Finally, after many attempts, humans of corn were made, the ones we know today. But if their stories are echoes of earlier cycles, then maybe even we are not the final version. Maybe we too are only one more draft, destined to be washed away so the story can be written again. Even the Greeks gave us this rhythm: the Golden Age, silver, bronze, and iron. Each age worse than the last, each ending with collapse. The Norse told of Ragnarok, but also of renewal, a green earth rising after destruction, ready for new life. The Hopi tell of previous worlds, ended by fire and flood, and warn that we now live in the fourth world. When this one ends, the fifth will begin. The consistency is striking. Cultures that never touched each other tell the same story. There were worlds before this one, and there will be worlds after. It's as if the memory is so deep, so ingrained, that it could not be erased, even when languages, empires, and entire peoples vanished. But here's the chilling thought. Maybe these aren't just symbolic cycles of morality or spirituality. Maybe they are encoded survival lessons. Perhaps long ago, a civilization saw itself collapse. By flood, by fire, by the wrath of the earth itself. Survivors carry the memory forward, but memories fade, so they wrapped it in story. In myth, a lesson can last longer than in stone. And so when we read these myths today, we are not just reading entertainment or allegory. We may be hearing the voices of forgotten ancestors, telling us, be careful, civilizations do not last. The wheel turns. Prepare yourself, for it will turn again. So the next time you hear a flood story, or a tale of fire that ends a world, don't dismiss it as superstition. Hear it as a whisper from deep time. Maybe it is the last gift of a people erased, a warning passed through the ages. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. Let's turn back to science, because if the myths are warnings, then the earth today may already be whispering the same message. Every cycle has its signs, and perhaps we are living through ours. Start with the climate. The last 150 years have seen global temperatures rise faster than almost any time in geologic history. Ice sheets are melting, seas are rising, storms grow stronger, fires burn hotter, droughts linger longer. We like to think of climate change as unique to us, but Earth has done this before. Sudden warming events are written into the rocks. The Paleocene thermal maximum, 56 million years ago, saw temperatures rise sharply, oceans acidify, ecosystems collapse. Life survived, but it was reshaped. If it happened once, it can happen again. The difference this time is that we are the cause. Then there's biodiversity. Scientists speak now of the sixth extinction. Species vanish daily, at rates not seen since the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs. Coral reefs bleach and crumble. Forests are cut faster than they regrow. Insects, the silent machinery of ecosystems, are disappearing. Each extinction cycle in Earth's past cleared the stage for something new. Are we watching the stage being cleared again, this time with us still standing on it? Consider also the soil beneath our feet. Civilizations need food, and food comes from soil. But across the world, fertile soil is thinning, eroding, or poisoned by overuse. Civilizations before us collapsed when their fields failed. The Akkadians in Mesopotamia, the Mayans in Central America, the Khmer in Cambodia. Each thought itself secure, until the land itself withdrew its gift. And then there is energy. Our civilization burns through resources at a scale no other species ever has. Fossil fuels, ancient sunlight stored in rock, are vanishing even as their use destabilizes the climate. In deep time, this will look like a sharp, unnatural spike in carbon, a chemical scar across the geologic record, a signal that something extraordinary happened here, something unsustainable. When you weave these threads together, the picture looks familiar. Rapid warming, mass extinction, soil exhaustion, resource depletion. These are not just modern headlines. They are the ingredients of collapse, repeated through history at smaller scales, now amplified to the planetary level. So here is the haunting symmetry. If civilizations are cyclical, then perhaps we are nearing the end of ours. The signs are here, as they were for others before us. And if we fall, our ruins may not outlast the forests. Our monuments may not endure the seas. We may become only a faint fingerprint in stone and carbon, a puzzle for some future intelligence to stumble upon. And maybe that is the pattern. Rise, flourish, collapse, forget, begin again. Earth turns the wheel, and each time it gives life a new chance, a new draft of civilization. So as you breathe tonight, let this thought rest with you. Perhaps we are not heading into the end of history, but into its continuation, the next reset in Earth's endless cycle of remembering and forgetting. Let's stay with our present fragility and imagine, slowly, how our civilization might actually unravel. Not in the sudden flash of apocalypse, but in the quieter, slower ways that history's cycles usually turn. Civilizations rarely fall all at once. They fray. They thin at the edges. Their foundations weaken before their towers topple. The Romans did not vanish in a single day. They declined over centuries, their empire hollowed by economic strain, overextension, climate stress, and disease. The Mayas' great cities were not burned in a single night. Their water systems failed, their fields went dry, and people simply walked away. Collapse, more often than not, is gradual, a slow forgetting. So what would it look like for us? First, food systems. Soil erosion, desertification, and shifting rainfall could make harvests unreliable. Crops that once fed millions may fail. Famine does not always sweep in suddenly. It seeps, village by village, family by family, until the world feels thinner, hungrier, less secure. Then, water. Glaciers that sustain rivers are retreating. Aquifers are being drained faster than they refill. Wars need not be fought over oil if they are fought instead over rivers, lakes, and the last fertile valleys. Next, infrastructure. Modern cities depend on fragile networks, electricity grids, shipping routes, supply chains. A storm here, a drought there, and systems strain. Add more stress and they snap. When the grid goes dark, when ports fail, when trucks stop running, the silence spreads faster than fire. And then social trust. Civilizations are not just buildings and machines. They are agreements, shared beliefs that tomorrow will resemble today. When those agreements falter, when people lose faith in governments, institutions, or even in each other, collapse accelerates. History shows us this again and again. When belief dissolves, empires crumble. Finally, memory. When a civilization falls, what survives is not just ruins, but stories. After Rome, much of Europe forgot how to make concrete, how to build aqueducts, how to write certain texts. Knowledge slipped through the cracks. Imagine how much more fragile our digital world is. If the internet failed, how much of our culture would vanish overnight? Hard drives corrode. Servers rust. Paper burns. Our libraries may be vast, but they are brittle. And here lies the deepest irony. Our civilization may be the most advanced, but it may also be the easiest to forget. 10,000 years from now, the forests may have covered our cities. The seas may have swallowed our coasts. The stars will still be there, but the telescopes we built to see them will be dust. All that remains will be whispers in the rocks, chemical scars, faint traces of plastic, thin radioactive lines. Enough for some future intelligence to wonder. Who were they? And why did they vanish? So maybe the myths were right. Maybe civilizations always fall, not because of enemies or gods, but because the earth itself is cyclical. Flood, fire, famine, forgetting. And each time, a few fragments survive, seeds of knowledge, stories of warning, just enough to begin again. Let's step outward now, into the cosmic view. Because if cycles of rise and fall are real here on Earth, why would they not echo across the universe? The laws of physics are not local. They are the same in every galaxy, every star system. Planets form from dust, oceans rise and fall, climates shift, and life struggles to adapt. If intelligence is not unique to us, then maybe its story is not unique either. Perhaps across the stars, civilizations bloom like flowers, bright, brief, and fragile, then vanish, leaving only faint pollen drifting in the cosmic wind. This idea has haunted scientists for decades, most famously through the Fermi paradox. If the universe is so vast, and planets so plentiful, then where is everyone? Why do we not hear their signals, see their cities, find their traces? One possible answer is the Great Filter. That civilizations, once they reach a certain point, collapse. Not once or twice, but always. Think about it. The challenges we face, climate instability, resource depletion, social fracture, are not uniquely human. They are the natural consequences of any species learning to use energy at planetary scale. Burn too much fuel, and the climate turns. Build too fast, and resources vanish. Grow too large, and stability falters. Maybe this is not just our problem. Maybe it is the problem. If so, then the galaxy may be full of ruins. Worlds where intelligent life rose, shone brightly, then fell silent. Some might still bear scars, altered atmospheres, traces of pollution, odd chemical signatures in the light of distant stars. Astronomers already search for such signs, calling them techno-signatures. A sudden surge of carbon dioxide on an exoplanet. A strange chemical that does not occur naturally. A shimmer of light that might mean artificial structures. But so far, we have found only silence. Silence, however, does not mean emptiness. It may mean the cycle has already played out countless times. Civilizations may have risen and fallen long before our first ancestors walked upright. Their signals may have faded, their monuments eroded, their knowledge dissolved. Just as we wonder whether Earth has had other humanities, perhaps the universe has had other intelligences, billions of them, each erased by the turning of the same cosmic wheel. And here lies the profound symmetry. What myths whisper on Earth, the stars may whisper across the cosmos. Worlds destroyed by fire, by flood, by their own excess. Worlds reborn again and again, each version unaware of the ones before. So as you drift tonight, imagine the night sky differently. Each star is not only a sun, but perhaps the grave of civilizations. Some worlds may be fresh and green, awaiting their first spark of intelligence. Others may be ruins, silent under ancient skies. And here we are, suspended in between, uncertain if we are the first, the only, or just the latest voice in an endless choir that rises and falls across the galaxy. Let's expand this cosmic cycle and imagine what it might look like across the galaxy. Other civilizations, other rises and falls, scattered like constellations of memory. Picture a planet orbiting a distant sun. It begins as ours did, oceans forming, continents shifting, life crawling from the sea. After billions of years, intelligence blooms. Perhaps not human-like, but something else. Scaled beings, feathered thinkers, vast hive minds, or creatures with senses we cannot imagine. They build, they wonder, they reach for the stars. For a time, their world shines with the lights of cities. Then the cycle turns. Climate wavers. Resources dwindle. Or perhaps a single catastrophic asteroid sweeps them into silence. To us, the star seems unchanged. To them, it was the end of everything. Now imagine another world, far older than Earth. Its civilization may have risen 1 billion years before ours. Long enough for them not only to build but to explore, to send their machines or minds across the galaxy. And yet, where are they now? If cycles hold true, perhaps they too collapsed. Their monuments may still orbit distant suns, derelict satellites long forgotten. Their chemical fingerprints may still linger in planetary atmospheres. But across millions of years, even those signs would fade. What remains is silence, the echo of something vast that once was. Perhaps the silence we hear when we point our radio telescopes at the sky is not proof of emptiness, but of fragility. Intelligence may not be rare. Survival may be. The great filter may not be a single wall, but the endless rhythm of rise and fall. Civilizations bloom, burn bright, then fade before they can meet each other. They pass like ships in the cosmic night, their lights extinguished before the next can see them. Could even be that the universe itself is cyclical. Cosmologists speak of the Big Bang, but some theories imagine many Big Bangs. Universes expanding and collapsing, reborn again and again. If reality itself moves in cycles, why would civilizations not echo that same pattern? Perhaps intelligence is not an endpoint, but a recurring experiment. Tried on Earth, tried on other worlds, tested again and again across the endless canvas of stars. And if so, then we may not be alone at all. We may be surrounded, not by living neighbors, but by ghosts, the quiet remains of countless civilizations erased by time. We are the latest verse in a song sung not just on Earth, but everywhere life dares to dream. As you let that thought drift, imagine this. Each star above you could hold a story like ours. Some at their dawn, some at their twilight, some already erased. The galaxy becomes a library, not of living voices, but of echoes scattered across time, waiting for someone to listen. Let's continue this cosmic imagining and wander among the possible civilizations that may have lived and died beneath alien suns. Because if the cycle of rise and fall is universal, then Earth is not unique. It is simply one of many experiments, one of many drafts in the great story of intelligence. Picture a world with two suns, its sky painted in perpetual gold. Life there adapts to the shifting light. Creatures with mirrored skins to reflect heat, forests of crystal-like plants that drink starlight instead of water. In time, one species learns to build. They sculpt their cities from the crystals themselves, towering spires that glitter across valleys. For thousands of years they thrive, until the climate shifts. Two suns pulling tides in chaotic rhythms, storms tearing at the land. Their civilization falters, collapses, and is buried beneath dunes of shattered crystal. If we saw the planet today, it would look barren. Only the faint glimmer in starlight would whisper that something once dreamed there. Now imagine a world of oceans without land. Intelligent life rises not on soil, but in the sea. Perhaps vast cephalopod minds, communicating through bioluminescent patterns, build networks of coral cities, weaving tools from shells and stone dredged from the depths. For 1,000,000 years they flourish, their history stored not in books but in living memory, passed from one mind to another. But oceans shift, currents change. A supervolcano beneath the sea poisons their world. Their coral empires collapse, dissolving into rubble. Today, their planet may look empty, just another ocean sphere spinning in silence. Or picture a planet with giant moons, their pull driving colossal tides, carving coastlines anew each day. The beings here evolved to move with constant change, nomads by necessity. When intelligence comes, their civilizations are never static. They build fleets of floating cities, forever shifting with the tides. For tens of thousands of years they ride the waves, their culture fluid, resilient. But when an asteroid falls, their world is plunged into chaos, and even their ocean-roaming ingenuity cannot save them. And perhaps, somewhere, there was a world that solved it. A civilization that learned the cycle and stepped beyond it, escaped the fragility of planets by scattering their minds across the stars. But even then, time is vast. Stars die. Galaxies collide. Entropy pulls everything apart. Maybe even they were not spared. Maybe nothing is. What we see when we look into the night sky may not be emptiness, but aftermath. Every star could be a grave. Every silence a record of civilizations erased by their own fragility, by their planets, by the universe itself. And so the question returns to us. Will we be different? Will we find a way to step beyond the cycle? Or will we, too, leave only chemical fingerprints and myths for some future mind to puzzle over? As you drift tonight, imagine yourself standing beneath the stars, not as a lone observer, but as part of a vast, invisible chorus of civilizations. Most gone, some struggling, a few yet to come. The universe is not quiet. It is full of echoes. Let's return now to Earth's deep memory, grounding ourselves again in the soil, the stone, and the stories beneath our own sky. Because while it is awe-inspiring to imagine civilizations across the stars, the most haunting mysteries lie here, beneath our feet. Consider the strange way ancient knowledge appears and disappears in our history. Agriculture, for example, arises around 10,000 years ago in multiple places. Mesopotamia, China, Mesoamerica. Was it invention or rediscovery? Did scattered survivors of a forgotten age carry fragments of memory, planting them again like seeds in the soil? Or take megaliths, those great stones scattered across the earth. From Stonehenge to Karnak, from the temples of Malta to the giant trilithons of Baalbek, cultures separated by oceans and centuries seemed compelled to raise stone toward the sky. Why stone? Because it endures. Wood rots. Clay crumbles. But stone carries memory across cycles. Could these monuments have been more than ceremonial? Could they have been beacons, each culture whispering to the future, "We were here. Do not forget." Even myths themselves may be archives. The story of Atlantis, told by Plato, is often dismissed as allegory. Yet its details are specific. A great civilization, advanced, proud, destroyed in a single catastrophe of flood and fire. Was Plato inventing a parable or retelling a memory, one already old in his time, of a cycle before ours? The great flood stories resonate the same way. From the Sumerian Utnapishtim to Noah, from Manu in India to Deucalion in Greece, the pattern repeats. Humanity nearly erased, a remnant preserved, a new beginning. Science shows us that seas did rise dramatically after the Ice Age. Perhaps those stories are not symbolic at all, but recollections, blurred but persistent, of an older humanity watching its world drown. And then there are the puzzles of technology in unexpected places. Ancient maps that seem to chart coastlines now submerged. Myths of fire from the sky, machines of the gods, cities of light. Even if most are exaggerations, Could they be exaggerations built upon truths? A memory of knowledge lost, recast in story when the tools themselves were gone? The earth forgets quickly, but humans remember strangely. We bury our warnings in stone, in myth, in ritual. Survivors of one cycle may have carried fragments into the next, not as instruction manuals, but as legends. Legends we now treat as fantasy, when perhaps they are exactly what they were meant to be. Signals from the last time the wheel turned. So here is the thought to rest with. Our history may not be the first draft. It may be the latest revision, written atop older versions, with only fragments left between the lines. Myths, ruins, alignments. These may be the footnotes of forgotten ages, reminders that the earth has seen civilizations come and go before, and will again. Let's look toward the future, and imagine what it might be like if our own cycle came to an end, and another began. Because if Earth has seen civilizations rise and fall before, then perhaps it already knows what comes after us. Picture our cities centuries from now, abandoned. Skyscrapers hollowed by wind, highways cracked and overgrown, rivers claiming the concrete banks we thought eternal. Nature does not destroy in fury, it reclaims in patience. Roots slip into stone, moss softens steel. The bones of our world vanish not in an instant, but in a slow, quiet forgetting. 1,000 years pass. Forests spread across the ruins. Animals roam where cars once drove. The last bridges crumble into rivers, their spans carried away piece by piece. Our monuments remain only as hills of rubble. If anyone came then, they might not know there had been a city at all. 10,000 years pass. Seas rise. Coastlines redraw themselves. The ruins of New York, Mumbai, Shanghai, all drowned. Our digital archives are gone. Hard drives and paper alike reduced to dust. The only memory is in stone, and even that is fading. Perhaps a few structures endure in strange forms. Mount Rushmore weathered into faceless mountains, the pyramids worn smooth, their sharp edges gone. 100,000 years pass. Ice ages come and go. Forests are replaced by deserts, then seas. Continents drift a little farther. Our entire civilization is compressed into a thin, dark line in the rocks. A spike of carbon, a whisper of plastic molecules, a trace of radioactive isotopes. That is all that remains. And then, someday, life begins again. Perhaps a species of bird, clever and adaptable, grows more intelligent with each generation. Or cephalopods in the oceans, building networks of shells and coral. Or perhaps it is something stranger, something we cannot imagine, born from conditions unlike any we know. Intelligence is patient. It does not mind waiting millions of years. They rise. They flourish. They ask questions. They find fossils of our world, fragments of strange materials, unnatural isotopes, hints that something came before. They wonder, were we the first? They tell stories of worlds destroyed by flood, by fire, by forgotten peoples. Their myths echo ours. Their science finds strange anomalies in the rock. And so the cycle turns again. We too may become myth. A story carried forward not in books, but in whispers across species, in faint geological scars, in mysteries that puzzle the next intelligence to rise. So perhaps the most important question is not whether we will endure forever. Perhaps it is this: what will we leave behind for those who come after? A warning? A lesson? A gift? Or only silence? Let's stay in that future Earth without us, and imagine what the next civilization might inherit, what they might see, what they might guess about us, and how their myths of the ones before might take shape. The year is far beyond counting. Our cities are long gone, swallowed by forests, deserts, and seas. Yet some things remain, fragments scattered like breadcrumbs across the landscape. A layer of strange stone in the cliffs, where sand and rubble fused into concrete. Tiny spheres of plastic, locked into sediment, glittering faintly in sunlight. A thin radioactive signature, a ghostly reminder of the age of atom splitting. Imagine a future intelligence walking the Earth. Perhaps they are not human at all. Perhaps they are avian, descended from crows or ravens, their minds sharpened by problem-solving, their wings diminished into hands. Or perhaps they are aquatic, cephalopods who have learned to shape shells and coral into tools. They do not find skyscrapers or satellites, but they find hints. Odd stones shaped by human hands, now indistinguishable from natural rock. A shard of glass, weathered but still gleaming. A fragment of metal alloy, corroded yet too refined to be nature's work. To them, these are puzzles. They weave stories around them. Perhaps they speak of giants who once ruled the earth, beings of fire who harnessed lightning and light. Perhaps they imagine us as gods, or as monsters, or as ancestors who failed. Just as we look at the ruins of Tiwanaku, Baalbek, or Göbekli Tepe and wonder, they will look at what little remains of us and invent their own histories. Over time, their science grows. They drill into the rock and find the Anthropocene layer, carbon spikes, nitrogen anomalies, radiation. They realize something extraordinary happened here, something unnatural. They argue among themselves. Was it a natural disaster? Or was it life, intelligent life, changing its world? Some will insist we were myth. Others will argue we were real. Some may even imagine we were them, an earlier cycle of their own species, forgotten and reborn. And perhaps they will be right in a sense, for life's patterns repeat, and intelligence may rise in familiar forms. And then, as their civilization grows, they may face the same challenges we did. Climate, resources, fragility. And when they begin to sense their own cycle turning, they may remember the whispers in the stone, the anomalies in the rock, the myths of those who came before. They may see us not only as mystery, but as warning. In that way we would live on, not as monuments, not as machines, but as myth. Our civilization remembered not for what it built, but for what it lost. And that memory might be the gift that allows the next to step further than we did. So here's the thought to carry with you. We will vanish, yes. But perhaps our vanishing will not be meaningless. Perhaps we are writing a story not only for ourselves, but for the civilizations yet to come. Let's linger a little longer with that future civilization, and imagine how they might interpret the faint traces we leave behind. Because when we look at the ruins of ancient peoples, we tell stories, sometimes accurate, often speculative. They will do the same with us. Picture their scholars gathered around a fragment of our world. A shard of plastic, hardened into rock by pressure and heat. To them, it is a mystery material, neither fully natural nor entirely artificial. They argue, was this some rare mineral, unique to a vanished epoch? Or was it the craft of intelligent beings, who learned to shape matter in ways no simple process could explain? Imagine them discovering the thin radioactive band left by our nuclear age. Some say it marks a catastrophe, that a people of fire destroyed themselves in a single blinding act. Others argue it was simply experimentation, a dangerous toy played with by those who did not understand the consequences. Myths form. Some call us the children of the atom. Others call us the burnt ones, a people erased by their own flame. Then there are the fossils. In layers just above the last ice age, they find bones of strange animals. Cows, pigs, chickens, in quantities far greater than nature would ever allow. To them, this is inexplicable. Why would so many species suddenly flourish in such numbers, only to vanish again? Some conclude we must have worshipped them. Others imagine we were a parasitic species, dependent on enslaving life itself. In their myths, humanity becomes the tenders of beasts, a people whose fate was tied to the creatures they consumed. And then, perhaps, they stumble upon one of the rare survivors of our architecture, something buried, shielded from erosion. A fragment of a skyscraper's steel skeleton, deep underground. A tunnel carved with perfect angles, unlike any cave. They might stand in awe, imagining us as giants. Perhaps they will think we lived beneath the earth, or reached toward the sky in towers of iron. Myths will rise from stone and silence. Over time, their philosophers will argue the larger question: were we real? Some will dismiss us as legend, stories told to explain anomalies in the rocks. Others will insist that we were a true civilization, lost in a cycle that repeats endlessly. For them, as for us, the question may never be fully answered. And yet, whether or not they prove our existence, we will have left something behind. The idea that civilizations rise and fall, that the world has turned before and will again, and that they themselves, no matter how mighty they become, are part of that cycle. In this way, we will live on not as fact but as warning, not as history but as myth. And perhaps that myth will be enough to help them survive their own turning of the wheel. So here's the thought to cradle tonight. Maybe our greatest legacy is not what we build, but what we leave in mystery. The unanswered question, the whisper in the rock, the possibility that we were here before. Let's stay with this future species, and watch how they might weave myths and philosophies around us. The faint, fragmented ancestors whose traces lie scattered in the stone, in their temples, or perhaps in their gatherings beneath coral domes or forest canopies. They tell stories of the people of smoke. These were the ones, they say, who filled the air with fire until the skies darkened and the seas rose. Some versions paint us as gods, others as reckless children. But in every version, we disappear, leaving the world scarred and silent. Their philosophers debate the lesson. One school insists we were a warning, that intelligence carries within it the seed of collapse. Another insists we were necessary, that each failed civilization enriches the soil for the next, teaching through absence what could not be learned through survival. To them, our downfall is not tragedy but instruction. Their storytellers embellish. They describe our towers as mountains of glass that touch the clouds, our roads as rivers of stone, our machines as beasts of metal that carried us faster than wind. None of it is exact, but none of it is entirely wrong either. Memory, even when reshaped into myth, carries truth in its bones. In their myths, we take on different forms. Some say we were giants, striding across the land, leaving ruins too vast for ordinary beings. Others say we were tiny insects, swarming so many that we reshaped the earth itself. A few imagine we were spirits of fire, beings who controlled lightning and atom, too powerful for our own survival. And among their wise ones, a quiet belief lingers. Perhaps we were not the first either. They look at their own rising civilization, at their own growing fires, and they see the same pattern we once feared. They begin to wonder if even they are simply another verse in an endless song, a story Earth has been telling since the beginning. To them, we become myth, but not a distant one. a mirror, a reminder. Their priests, or scientists, or philosophers point to the anomalies in stone and say, "This is where they fell. Do not repeat their path." And maybe, just maybe, that lesson helps them step further than we did. Maybe they will be the ones to break the cycle. Or maybe they will join us, becoming another whisper in the rock, another myth for a future species to debate. Here is the thought to hold tonight. We are not only living our story, we may also be writing someone else's scripture, someone else's myth, someone else's warning. In that sense, our fragility is not the end of us, but the beginning of our echo. Let's return now to our present moment and ask, if cycles are real, if others will come after us, what kind of legacy can we consciously leave? Because though much of what we build will be erased, we still have a choice in what remains. We know what vanishes: glass, steel, paper, even cities themselves. We know what endures: stone, myth, chemistry. So perhaps the question is not whether we will be remembered, but how. Some propose building time capsules, sealed vaults holding our knowledge, our languages, our stories. But vaults crack, metals rust, and 10,000 years is a blink of an eye in deep time. Few would survive long enough to matter. Others imagine messages written into geology itself. Artificial isotopes, carefully arranged layers in stone, patterns too deliberate to be natural. If another civilization drills into the rock, they might see those anomalies as more than accidents, as signs. But how do you ensure they read them as meaning, not just as another puzzle? There is also the idea of myth-making. Myths survive far longer than libraries. The Great Flood story has lasted across millennia, carried from culture to culture. If we wanted to send a message across cycles, maybe the best medium is not technology but story. Something simple, symbolic, unforgettable. A tale that warns, do not repeat our mistakes. A tale that survives not because it is written in stone, but because it is carried in memory. And then there are the boldest dreams, sending our legacy into space. Golden records already ride aboard the Voyager probes, carrying music, languages, and images of Earth out of the solar system. Perhaps one day they will be found. Perhaps they will wander forever. But even if they vanish into the void, they symbolize something vital, our desire to be remembered, to say we were here. Maybe the most profound legacy we can leave is not material at all, but ethical. If we survive long enough to recognize the cycle, to break free from it, then our gift to the future would be endurance itself, a path that does not end in silence. And if we do not survive, perhaps our lesson will still be carried forward. That intelligence must learn humility, that power without balance leads only to forgetting. So here is the thought. We may not be able to choose whether we survive forever, but we can choose what we leave for those who will come after. A scar, a ruin, a warning, or a gift. Let's imagine how we might deliberately craft a message that could outlast us, a voice that speaks not just to the next generation, but perhaps to the next cycle of civilization, or even the next version of humanity itself. First, we must accept the limits of survival. Books decay. Digital files vanish almost instantly without power. Even stone erodes. So what remains? What speaks across thousands, even millions, of years? Geology. If we etched symbols into bedrock or carved entire mountains into messages, those might endure. Think of the pyramids, or Mount Rushmore, already thousands of years old, and still visible. Now imagine something built not for aesthetics, but for endurance. Vast carvings designed to last as long as tectonic plates allow. Could we inscribe warnings into cliffs and canyons, so that future minds, human or otherwise, might one day read them? Astronomy. Stars move slowly, predictably. Ancient cultures aligned monuments with solstices and constellations, and we can still read those messages today. What if we built structures pointing not to mythic gods, but to truths? Alignments with galaxies, pulsars, black holes, cosmic landmarks that endure across eons. Perhaps future civilizations could decode these alignments as intentional, as a way of saying, "We knew the sky. We were here." Myth itself. Words fade, but stories endure when they are retold. Imagine seeding myths across cultures, designed to survive as oral traditions long after our machines vanish. A story of cycles, of hubris, of the dangers of fire and flood. A story simple enough to be remembered, powerful enough to be believed. Perhaps that is already happening. Perhaps the myths we inherited were crafted by those before us, whispering warnings across ages. Artificial fossils. What if we placed deliberate anomalies in the rock? Shapes of elements arranged in impossible ways, materials fused that nature cannot produce. Millions of years from now, these would appear as puzzles in the geologic record, undeniable signs that something intelligent once walked here. Not monuments, but signatures in stone. And finally, space. We could send more than voyagers, messages encoded in durable form, scattered like seeds into the galaxy. Not because we expect them to be found, but because in a universe of cycles, some might survive long enough to be read. Even if Earth erases us, the cosmos may carry our echo. But here lies the paradox. The harder we try to preserve ourselves, the clearer the truth becomes. Nothing lasts forever. Not stone, not myth, not memory. In deep time, all things are erased. Perhaps the only true message we can send is not permanence, but pattern. That we rose, that we fell, that intelligence existed here once, and that it may rise again. So perhaps the best legacy is not to fight the cycle, but to acknowledge it. To leave behind reminders not of our greatness, but of our fragility. To say to the future, we too were here, and we too struggled against the turning of the wheel. Let's dive into the philosophy of acceptance, because perhaps the deepest wisdom in all of this is not how to resist the cycle, but how to live knowing we are part of it. Humanity has always chased permanence. We build monuments of stone to outlast us. We write books, carve laws, archive data in the hope that someone, somewhere, will remember. We look to the stars and imagine colonies, thinking perhaps distance will save us. But deep time teaches a different lesson. Nothing endures unchanged. Even mountains wear down. Even stars burn out. So what does it mean to live in a world where civilizations rise and fall like seasons? It means understanding that our value is not in our permanence, but in our participation. We are a verse in a much longer song, one whose melody we may never hear in full. The fact that our verse will end does not make it meaningless. It makes it precious. The myths we explored, the yugas, the ages of man, Ragnarok, the floods, perhaps they were never about despair. Perhaps they were about perspective. They remind us that collapse is not an aberration, but part of the rhythm of existence. To resist it entirely may be impossible. To live wisely within it, that is the real task. Think of the tree that grows, falls, and returns to soil. Its death nourishes new life. Civilizations may be the same. Our fall, when it comes, will not be the end of life or intelligence. It will be a transformation, feeding the next cycle. Perhaps our role is not to last forever, but to contribute, to shape the conditions for what comes next. This is not hopelessness. It is humility. It is the recognition that meaning is not found in eternity, but in the act of living well within the time we are given. If future civilizations rise, they may not remember our names, our languages, or our cities, but they may benefit from the traces we leave behind, the carbon that reshaped the climate, the myths that warned of fire and flood, the lessons encoded in silence. And here lies the deepest peace. To know that we are not the first, and will not be the last, is to accept our place in the universe's rhythm. We are not outside of it. We are within it. The wheel turns, and we are part of its turning. So tonight, as you close your eyes, let yourself rest in this thought. You are part of something vast, ancient, and cyclical. Your life, our civilization, even humanity itself, all are chapters in a story older than memory and longer than time. And that story will continue, with or without us, carried forward on the breath of Earth itself. Let's close with a gentle reflection, a weaving together of myth, science, and philosophy into one final thought to carry with you into the quiet. We began with a question. What if history is cyclical, and we are not the first? Along the way, we wandered through myths of floods and fire, through ruins that refused to give up their secrets, through geology's deep scars, through the silence of the stars. Everywhere, we found the same pattern: rise, fall, forgetting, renewal. A rhythm older than memory, older than us. Science tells us civilizations are fragile. Myth tells us they are fleeting. Philosophy tells us this is not failure, but the way of things. The earth moves in cycles. The universe itself may move in cycles. And we, bright, restless, dreaming, are part of that same rhythm. But here is the truth worth holding gently. Even if we are not the first, even if we are not the last, our moment matters. To live is to add our voice to the great chorus of existence, a verse that may echo far longer than we imagine. We may vanish, but the fact that we were here will ripple outward. In chemistry, in myth, in memory. Perhaps someday another intelligence will rise, and they will wonder about us, just as we wonder about those who may have come before. Perhaps they will find our traces, or perhaps only our silence. Either way, the cycle will turn, and life will go on. And that is not despair. It is continuity. It means we belong to something far greater than ourselves. A story without beginning, without end, always unfolding. A story written in stone, in stars, in the breath of living things. So as you drift into sleep, rest with this thought: we are part of the pattern. We are part of the song. And though the wheel will turn, our verse will never be meaningless, because it is part of the whole. Good night, traveler. May your dreams carry you through the cycles of time, where endings are beginnings, and every silence is only the pause before the song begins again.